Friends, welcome to the very first in our series of Export Ready webinars brought to you by Folk Music Canada and Folk Music Ontario. So glad you could join us. As noted, no doubt you saw in the promo as well as in the registration. We're going to be holding these for the next 5 weeks, including this week, on Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As you RSVP'd, you will get the link for each week. If you can't make it, no worries. We're recording them, so you'll be able to check them out at a later date. I'm going to send it on over to my good friend Roslyn. But first, I don't know where you're listening from, but here in Ottawa, we broadcast from the traditional and unceded lands of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. We're going to have a very interesting in-depth session on all things visas and immigration and cross-border playing. And to get us into it, I'm going to send it on over to my very good friend, Roslyn Dennett.
Thank you so much, Joel. Welcome everyone. Really excited to be kicking off the series that we're doing it every Wednesday at 3 p.m. And this is every Wednesday in March. So there's 5 of them all together. There's a lot of Wednesdays in March, apparently. I picked quite a month to do an every Wednesday session. But yeah, 3 p.m. And we're going to have a whole bunch of experts. And speaking of experts, today we have the queen of visas. She's the visa czar, Liana White. Liana White is the executive director of the Canadian Federation of Musicians, which for those of you who aren't familiar, it's the Musicians Union. So it's the Canadian National Office of the American Federation of Musicians. She has over 25 years experience helping musicians navigate the legal requirements to perform cross-border. She's become recognized within the music industry as the leading authority on visas and immigration. And she's involved in every aspect of the union's operations, from lobbying and negotiating lucrative agreements on behalf of musicians. Also does a ton of mentoring, is incredibly accessible if you have any questions or want to do follow-ups. Liana's one of the most generous people with her time and expertise that I've ever come across. She also sits on the board of Women in Music Canada. She's on the Canadian Labour Congress Women's Caucus and the Workers of Colour Caucus. Liana, welcome.
Hello. Well, thank you. Hello, everybody.
So we're going to go through a presentation today. I feel like there's kind of 2 sides to our conversation that we'll have. So we'll go through your presentation, maybe do kind of like a broader, and we can get into nitty-gritty details as well about the visas and the process that people need to enter into the US as a performing musician. We're speaking particularly about the US, but if folks have, Liana knows a lot about all sorts of things. So if you do have questions about performing, we will get into, performing in other countries and other continents as we go along in this series. So we're going to really focus on the US in this one. But if you do have some questions, if it's related in some way, feel free to ask. And if we know it, we'll answer it. But yeah, we'll get into that. We'll also maybe on the second half talk about the proposed fee increases to the P2 and the O and the visas that are currently being proposed by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. It's like a really timely time to talk about it because there's like a little window that we can make some change. So great that we can have this audience with Liana, who knows all about it and is working really, really hard lobbying against this proposed fee increase. But let's start at the basics, okay? Well, I'm going to pull up this beautiful presentation.
It's gorgeous,
right?
I'm very fortunate to have it.
Now, Liana's being very kind because I helped make it in my former life working for, full disclosure, I have previously worked at Canadian Federation of Musicians and am currently proud member of the CFM. So hopefully everyone can see this okay. Can someone give me like a thumbs up that you guys got this on your screen here? I don't see anything in the chat. No one's saying they can't see it.
I can see
Great.
it. So
That's all I
think
need. That's what's
I think everybody should be able to then.
perfect. And that's what's important. Oh, Jamie sees it. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, folks. Look at all. Okay. I appreciate the affirmation. Oh, John says that the chat is disabled. So, I don't know if that's, but it looks like you guys can access the Q&A. So maybe that's the way to go. Okay, here we go. Canadian Federation of Musicians, make the most of your membership. Work visas. So if you don't mind, Liana, I'll kind of
go ahead.
Ask a few questions to start off, and then you can keep going. But I was wondering if we can just start by taking us through the different types of visas and what they do, who they're for.
Okay. So as it's shown on the screen here, there are 4 different categories of visa. And the first being first listed here is the P1. The P1 is for bands or ensembles of international recognition, or international recognition is a little bit loosely stated. If they are of a high caliber, or depending on how much how well established they are, even if they're just well established in their own country or in Europe, let's say, then they would potentially qualify for the P1. I will skip the P2 because that's what we're going to get in depth on. So going on to the P3, this visa is specific to soloists and groups who are performing very cultural music. So, if you want to think of Japanese drummers, or, you're an artist from Israel playing actually, no, it wouldn't be sitar. What am I thinking here? From India then, playing the sitar. I was thinking of the horn.
Anything in the shofar? I'm loving this.
Shofar. Yes, that's what I was thinking of. Yes, and, which totally escaped me, but sitar came in mind. Anyway,
it's all good. So, they're all cultural.
So yes, and you would be performing. Those individuals would be performing for usually in a cultural center, or if there was just some sort of cultural event, like a display of different cultures and their ethnic type of music. Not to say that, Canadian folk or, isn't cultural, but it's not the same. It doesn't fall under the definitions that for the eligibility of what USCIS deems as a cultural event. And the O1 visa are for artists, highly skilled artists or artists of international recognition. It is only for one person. If the O1 individual does have a backing band or crew or what have you, then an additional visa would be required, the O2, which is the supplemental to that O1 individual. So O1s are typically not for a formed group. That's where you would defer to the P1.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Can I hop in?
Sure.
And just ask a couple questions about some of the ones that you listed. Yeah. So, and not to nitpick into this, but for the P3, for the one that culturally unique, let's say we're broadening our concept of what Canadian folk is, something like, if you're performing in like a traditional, if you play traditional French Canadian, if you're in a French Canadian Quebecois band, that's playing traditional music, is that going to qualify as something that's culturally unique?
It's actually more the event than the artist. So of course, the artist would know how to perform that music if this was, if the event was highlighting Quebec style, like what you have just described, then so, yes, then they could potentially qualify for the P3. Yes.
Okay.
So in that sense, it's really the event that it's tied to more than the artist themselves.
Okay. And is that and so it would be kind of up to the folks who are hiring you. So it's kind of like up to the presenter to
Yes, the
make the
presenters.
case that it's a culturally
That's right.
unique.
That's right. So they would have a description of what the performance was, or the occasion was that the performance was taking place. So depending on what that description is, like generally speaking, if this type of band, it doesn't matter if it's a cultural performance or not. This is where the P2 is quite open and quite flexible. So a Canadian might as well just get the P2 anyway. However, if in this situation, the band, the type of band that you have referenced was playing a cultural event, and the presenter wanted to petition for the visa, they actually could. U.S. presenters can petition for these visas, but generally speaking, they have so much other work they're doing, they would engage a lawyer to process that. So, but yes, again, it's the event. It's the event, bottom line, that they would be playing at, performing.
Great, thank you. And I don't know if you were about to start talking about the O2, but do you mind just mentioning what that is?
Yes, I did. Yeah. So the O1 is for the individual artist. The O2 is any backup band or crew that they may have. So think, I don't know, think Michael Bublé. We know his name. Yes, maybe Michael performs with the same set of people all the time, but it would be Michael Bublé who would qualify for the O, and the band is an O2 supplemental. So if you do have a backing band or crew with the O classification, you're going to be submitting two applications, 2 sets of fees, etc.
And how long? What's the length of the scope of that visa?
Okay, so for the O1s, they can be valid for up to 3 years. It just depends on the evidence, who you're signed with. If you're signed with an agent or a label that it's, that's going to be, or management company that is also involved in doing your bookings, then you do have the potential to qualify for a 3-year O permit, because it would be anticipated due to the relationship, the contract that you have with, such U.S. entity, that that you would be, having work come up over that 3-year period. But there's no guarantee that it will be for 3 years, and it could be 2, it could be 1. All the other classifications, the P classifications, can only be valid for 1 year.
Okay, great. And I'm not sure if we touched on this for the P1. I mean, we're going to get into the P2 and how to apply for that, but for the P1 and the P3 and the O, where would people go to apply for those visas?
Okay, so they would need a U.S. immigration attorney. And yeah, that's pretty much it. There are some visa service agencies out there as well. I believe Traffic Control is the name of one such agency, but primarily it's attorneys. And one that I typically work with is Covey Law, which also has the not-for-profit Tamizdat, which some people on this Zoom may be familiar with. But Matthew Covey is one a U.S. immigration attorney that I usually recommend and work with closely. We do have collaborative relationships, all of us petitioners. So,
Chris has asked the question here in the chat there, why you would pick a P2 over a P1, wondering if the P1 can also be for up to between 1 or 3 years. Is there any disadvantage to the P1? And he thanks you for the session.
The disadvantage would be the cost, because typically attorneys cost way more than the AFM does. Even with, it could be upwards of $10,000 for legal fees. It really depends on what you're looking at. It's at least $1,500 at the very least, and that's usually only for one artist. So, if you're an individual artist, which would not qualify for a P1, again, you cannot get a P1 as an individual. It must be a group or ensemble of some form. And you also have to be very well established. If this is going to be your first entry into the United States, it is highly unlikely you're going to qualify for the P1 as a group.
Yeah, the folks that I can think of that I know that are on a P1 are usually like working with like a label, and the label has their own in-house lawyer who's doing that on retainer, and so they can put all of their bands through that. Sorry, did you mention the length of it? Is that also 1 year?
Oh, it can be up to 1 year. It's also not necessarily 1 year, but it can be. Most typically it is. Just like with the P2 and the P3, I'm not really sold that one is, because you would be having to do like, well, it could be up, all of them can be up to 1 year, or they can be 6 months. It really depends on the work evidence that you have to support it. But generally speaking, most petitioners, including the AFM, do our best to stretch that visa out for 1 year.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I don't know if I mentioned this in the housekeeping or not, but yeah, feel free to ask us questions as we go along, because there's a lot of rabbit holes we can go down here, and if we might, you might not necessarily remember it. So while we have the information live and up here, feel free to ask any questions as we go along, and just stick them into the little question and answer Q&A chat there. Okay, so from here then, let's go into the P2. Let's enter the world of the world of the P2.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. All right. So a lot of this information is general too. So, requirements that are for the P2, you can also pretty much assume that that's what would be required for a P2 or P1, P3, or an O as well. In the way of such things as, I might as well touch on passport, for instance. Just briefly, we can get into that a little bit more deeply in a moment. But, you need to have your passports. You need to have a passport, and that passport must be valid for 6 months after the date of exit. So let's say you were on a 3-year O1. Your visa really needs to be valid, or your passport needs to be valid for at least 3 years and 6 months. So, and I found that during COVID, that a lot of people, this is what we're encountering as people are getting back on the road. It's understandable. People have not traveled for a long time, and they just forgot that their passport was about to expire. So we've had a lot of people have to go out and scramble to get their, rushed passports. Now the thing is you don't, need a passport. Your passport, you can be in an application process for your passport, or a renewal process for your passport at the time of applying. So you do not have to hold up applying. I always recommend apply as soon as possible, as soon as you've got all your work evidence together, your confirmed dates, and get that in, and we'll just deal with the passport issue as need be. Typically, we just ask that individual to write a letter stating that they are aware that their passport is ready to expire, and that they are in the process of getting their passport renewed, and it will be by the time of entry. So we can definitely get you an approved visa. But the thing is, once you get to the border, approved visa or not, if that passport is not valid at least 6 months beyond your date of exit, they will deny you entry. So very important for the point when you are going to enter. And then we can go back to the first page there, because I did want to get into this. I kind of skipped over the how you qualify for a year-long permit. Now, here I do say, we say a general rule of thumb of one engagement per 45 days. However, that's not necessarily written in stone. It's just kind of a guide, because as you can read here, it goes on to say, or proof of regular ongoing professional activity within the United States over a course of a year. So really, you'd need I would recommend 6 anchor dates. So, you've got one in the beginning of the year, early year, then early spring, then, a couple in the summer, fall, winter kind of thing. And we should be able to weave the dates together to ensure that you can get a year-long permit. You do not have to have all dates confirmed up front. If you've got some pending, or there could be potential schedule changes, that is, or itinerary changes rather, that is fine. You just need to notify our office as soon as you are aware of any changes, replacement dates, cancellations, additional dates. We need to know. Yes. So, and I mean, some artists are booking, like they've got an agent that's booking them, a pretty healthy amount of gigs, and they're performing regularly during the course of every month. And then some are not. When you're not performing, you should be, you shouldn't really remain in the United States, but at any rate, what I'm saying to you is it's multi-entry. So you can leave in between dates. If you have, let's say you're going to do you're starting in the US and then you're popping over to Europe for, a month, that's fine as well. And then you could re-enter from Europe. You can, come back to Canada, re-enter from Canada. So, you definitely do not have to remain there, remain in the United States. And that's the other thing too, is if in situations like, let's say you had an engagement in January and February, and then you were going to go over to Europe for 3 months. And so and then you're going to come immediately back to the United States and pick up your tour. Your European itinerary is also helpful to us to make the case that, well, this band is on a year-long tour all across the world. And they will, they will not have the time to apply for another visa. So, here's their itinerary to show what their travels are, and the fact that they'll need that it's most convenient for them to have a year approval at this time.
Thank you. I'm gonna just jump in with a question that came up in the chat there, which kind of applies to what you're talking about. So in between gigs, can people stay in the States? And the question from Nathan is, do the P class of visas permit U.S. residency?
You may live in the United States, yes, if you have, if you're there working, like if you're, working for one entity and regularly, yes. Now, where an issue can come up is if you've got only, let's say you've only got a handful of dates, the question comes up as, how are you supporting yourself in the United States? So there are times where, so we will ask that question, and it has to be answered. We have to be satisfied that you're able to support yourself while in the US, because we actually have to disclose your earnings to US immigration. And that is one of the criteria that we have to satisfy on your behalf to USCIS, because if they feel that you're going to just come in and then, well, what's going on? This person is making $150 a year, a gig, and they're planning to live in the United States, and you've only got 6 gigs. Nobody can live off of $150 once every couple of months. There must be something else going on. So we do need to be satisfied on how you will be supporting yourself. Now, of course, you've got a touring grant, and you're going to be recording your album in the United States in between gigs. Hey, that's great. That's fine. We know you've got a grant that's going to cover some of your expenses. But Yes, the shorter answer is yes, you can live there while under a P classification or an O classification, which makes sense if you've got regular work. Like if you're working even once a week, that makes sense to be a temporary resident for the course of your visa. Okay.
Thank you. And then another question here, which we probably should have chatted about on one of the earlier slides, was we forgot to mention the tech crew and like any crew that's working with musicians, lighting, audio, video, visual.
Yeah.
How do you apply for a visa for those folks, or do you
They're
have
the
to?
same. It's the same thing. So it's you just submit that kind of comes down into fees as well. So well, we can. Why don't you want to hit on fees there, and I'll go over that at this time. Okay. So here we have. Oh, actually, I don't have the double fees in there, but either way, at least you see the fees. So currently, it is $460 US for the band. If the band has crew, then it's an additional $460 US, and that is the fee that the Department of Homeland Security charges for the processing of the visa, and the 460 is specific to standard processing or regular processing. And that regular processing time frame, as it shows there, is 90 days. Now, there is, if you're going to file premium processing, as you see, there is an additional fee that is quite hefty of $2,500. If you have crew, it's going to be $5,000. So it will be $460 times 2 and $2,500 times 2. And in addition to that, these fees do need to be submitted under US dollar money orders. So there is the cost of the money order to consider. Excuse me. And USCIS will not allow you to combine the fee and just do one money order. You would need 2 separate money orders for $460 US each. And then if premium processing, another 2 money orders, again, assuming you have crew, another $2,500 a piece for those petitions, because they are filed separately. So for the P, the P2 is what the classification the band falls under. The crew is a classification P2S, the S standing for supplemental. The same applies to the P3 and the P1. And as I had mentioned earlier with the O is for an individual. If that individual has any other band members or just a whole bunch of crew, they all go under an O2, and it's the same thing. And these are the fees are the same for any of these classification of visa. It's Department of Homeland Security wise, then you've got who is going to administer the paperwork on your behalf, because bands are not eligible to petition on their own behalf. They need what USCIS refers to as a sponsor. In the case of AFM members or CFM members, it is the AFM who is the sponsor / petitioner. Yes.
Great, thank you. And there's another question, which I think, this person got in a little bit late, but they were wondering what visa would be required to allow for a festival performance, which we kind of went down the list of the things. You'll be able to see if you missed it at the beginning, like the different list of, we'll send out the video afterwards and kind of list all the different things, but the specifically for a festival,
any of them, it doesn't matter, any of them. And then there are festivals that will apply. Some festivals actually do the work and will petition directly. So a festival can petition if they want to, or they'll say, okay, well, this is the lawyer that we recommend that you work with, or something like that. If they're not doing the petition, then you have to seek outside assistance. And any one of those classifications, the P1, P2, P3, or O, will cover a festival. It doesn't. That doesn't matter. And even though this individual would have missed the fact that the P3 is for cultural type performances, cultural venues, cultural festivals. So yeah, I mean, provided that the festival or festivals they're performing at meet the cultural performance criteria that is set by USCIS, a P3 works just fine as well.
Thank you. And we got a question from Tony. Hi, Tony. Asking if Canadian permanent residents qualify, or do they have to be Canadian citizens?
No, Canadian citizens, absolutely. So the one beauty, even though, I mean, this is not going to sound like it's so great, but the one thing with Canadian citizens is they actually, we use the term visa, but as you can see here on this slide, I say work permit, because really, Canadians are visa exempt, meaning they can be processed right at the border or the pre-flight inspection when upon entry to the United States. So it's a work permit for a Canadian, and where the visa comes in. So for a permanent resident, yes, we can still apply, or whomever, and they can still qualify for any of those types of permits, but they do need to be issued a visa through a U.S. consulate, which is closest to their place of residence in Canada. So they actually do get the visa, and that's what it's meant, is you've got to get the visa approval through the consulate prior to hitting the border and entering. You will not be able to gain access into the United States without that pre-clearance if you are a permanent resident. Or even we have done it for musicians who are here on temporary work permits and not even permanent residents. That's fine. There's also a couple of bands that we have that have like a member who lives in the UK, even a crew member. We've got one that has a band member and one that has a crew member, both from the UK, and we petition for those. So long as you're in some way connected to a Canadian band or to Canada, we can definitely facilitate the process for you.
And those people can be all on the same petition?
Yeah, they're all on the
Amazing.
same petition, except that the visa for everybody, or the permit for everybody, is going to get held up. So let's say it's a band of 5, one is a permanent resident. That permanent resident needs to go through the consular process, whereas the other 4 do not. Okay. So they can just go directly to the border with the approval document that we provide them, or whomever provides them. And then while we're on this, I would like to speak to Indigenous artists. Now, and I should get this. Actually, I should update the info in here. I don't have a slide for that. At any rate, Indigenous artists, as long as they can gain entry to the United States under what is called J Treaty status, which means there's basically they may travel across the border freely. However, there are certain there is proof. There's criteria that is required. You would need a letter from your band, meaning the tribe, but the official reference is a letter from the band leader, tribe leader, that confirms you are of Indigenous status. And the amount of blood quantum, so how much Indigenous blood you have. You don't necessarily have to be 100% Indigenous, but I do believe it was at least 50%. Anything under 50%, then you would probably require a visa. And then there is an Indigenous Services Office. Actually, what I will do is I'm going to send I will send Rosalind an email with the actual specifics for Indigenous artists' entry to the United States. And then when sending this, the recorded presentation, this recording along to everybody, you can include the specifics, because I'm kind of going off the top of my head here, and I don't want to
absolutely
inform anybody. Yes, and there's like Indigenous services offices that you can call to get various documentation to prove your status. Yes. Anyway, so it is
Great.
possible. Now the only thing is, we'll stop. A little bit more to add. If the Indigenous artist, so an Indigenous artist can get in, and then we can apply for the rest of the band can fall under a visa. But when the artist is solo, there's no issue. When the artist is part of a band and you've only got, let's say that it's the lead is an Indigenous artist, and then the rest are just Canadians, or then that Indigenous artist would require a visa as well. It's only for their solo entry.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm going to just make sure that we touched on it. So we talked about passport. I don't know if we talked about confirming the gigs, and I know that there's
skimmed over it, but yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, not confirming. I just said that, okay, you need, I did, yeah, not in depth. So this is not an open work permit where it's like, oh, hey, can I get a work permit because I want to go into the United States and, shop around and look for an agent and, play a few open mics, and maybe I'll be able to pick up a gig here and there. None of the visas will allow for that. You must have some form of work or relationship with a label or with a manager or something like that to verify that you are eligible to be in the United States. What are you doing? You can enter the United States as a visitor. Like if you do really want to go in and meet with, a list of agents or managers that potentially could represent you, or, shop yourself to labels for their consideration to sign you. Sure. Then you go in as a visitor. And just as, general, I'm visiting the US status. But you cannot work if that's the case. So you cannot perform for hire at all. Okay. So now what a confirmed gig is, okay, we need, a contract or a letter of agreement, that states that this person has been engaged for, it has to be very, very detailed, very specific. This person has been engaged for, to perform here or for X amount of time. They will be compensated X dollars. And we need to know where you will be performing. So again, contracts, letter of agreement. If you are doing more than one if you're performing more than one engagement, an itinerary of all dates is also required. There are times, because we have been asked this, so I might as well put it out there. There are times where not always, like especially if you're doing a year-long permit, that you won't have all engagements necessarily under a contract or signed off on as yet. As long as we have got, like if there's a detailed email that covers that engagement, we can accept an email confirming the performance. Especially that happens a lot when there's a whole bunch of gigs that are being booked, and it's just, contracts aren't coming back in quickly enough and what have you. I just had a thought in my head. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I hop in? Just to make a point in here. So, we're talking about confirming gigs, we're looking way in advance. So obviously things can change at any moment. So one of the points I want to make at this time is that to no matter what, contact the CFM if you're going through on the P2 and with CFM as the petitioner. If anything changes, like anything, if a gig gets canceled, contact them. If you add a gig, contact them. There's a start and an end date to your visa, and certainly you need the everything to be in ship shape when you apply. But once you have that visa, if things get shifted around, it's still really important to keep in contact with the CFM office, because when you're going over the border, if something's changed and they call in to check, and somebody asked a question about border crossing too, so we'll get to this, but if things have changed on, let's say on your website versus what the itinerary is on your visa application, there can be trouble. They're gonna, essentially they've used the word fraud. They're saying you're applying to come into our country saying you're playing here, here, and here. Now on your website, it says actually you're playing here, here, and here. So, this is, that's not acceptable. So if all you have to do is really call in to the office and let them know, so that when, if you do get a trip like that happening and somebody's checking in at the border, Liana can say, yes, we have that confirmed. This got changed, a gig got canceled, or a gig got added over here. I think that sometimes musicians or, folks can be timid or afraid to like mess with it. They're like, oh, I got the visa and now I have it and it's fine. And they don't want to, they're afraid that if they mess with it, all of a sudden they'll have to, I don't know, pay triple somehow. But if it's within the start and end date, just let folks know.
That's correct. Yeah, no, yes, and that's totally fine. And just so you know, that the USCIS and my office, to a degree, we have a responsibility to verify the engagements. So we will, our staff does have to double check, like, venue listings, festival listings, to make sure that you're listed. Unfortunately, there have been people who have tried to manipulate the system and just found a whole bunch of US festivals and listed them on an itinerary and tried to sell it. That's where they were booked, and we had to return those files. So again, if there's a date that's tentative, so long as there is legitimacy in what you are submitting, then we're fine with it. We will work with you. We understand, as Rosalind just clearly pointed out, that itineraries change, dates change, I mean, who knows? A venue could catch on fire and then you cannot perform there, or it could be just, a shifting of whatever dates for whatever reason. So just stay in touch with us and it will be fine.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go into membership quickly. And there was a question about whether or not the AFM, like the CFM processing fee for filing the petition, that's in Canadian dollars, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Great.
Yeah, Canadian dollars. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that fee is it's $120 for one musician, and then $25 per additional musician. And then for crew, it would be the same, $120 and then $25 each thereafter. Okay, so why do I need to be a member to get a visa? This is a question that I hear. Well, because the AFM is only authorized by U.S. immigration to petition on behalf of its members. So we actually do not have jurisdiction over non-members, and we do not have the ability to apply for them unless, of course, they fall in the supplemental, like if they are, sound light, crew, tour manager. Tour manager, by the way, does need a visa. A manager doesn't, but if it's a tour manager guiding the tour specifically, you do require a visa. Anyone selling merch, if you're bringing a merch person, they would require a visa too. So just to throw that out there. So those individuals do not require membership. In the case where I said, there's sometimes members of bands which are from abroad, that we do include on the petition. There is just a higher processing fee for that individual. So, yes, and then also I will state, while you don't necessarily, as a Canadian, because Canadians do file for O's and they do file for P1s and P3s as well, while you don't necessarily need to be a member to obtain any of those visas, what a lot of people don't realize is that the U.S. immigration works with every artist that is coming into the United States with the AFM's New York office. So it could be an artist coming in from Turkey, and my New York office is consulted on it. They are vetting the petition, etc. For non-members, because the vast majority of individuals they're servicing are non-members from abroad. But if it's a Canadian non-member, they're going to have to pay an additional fee of it's between $350 and $500 for that service. If you are a Canadian member, and you just choose to get a P1 or an O1, then that fee is waived. So you're not paying that additional fee as a member. So,
Thank you. There's been a few questions again about
Sure.
the Jade Treaty Indigenous artists
Yes.
traveling, and I think there was some folks want some clarification about an Indigenous artist traveling with non-Indigenous folks.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
you mind just clarifying? I think you said that the Indigenous artists, if they're traveling in their group, if there are non-Indigenous artists, the Indigenous artist would have to be on a P2. Did I hear that correctly?
That's yes.
Okay. Um, I don't know if that totally answered. Can you explain? There's a few
Well, it
questions
does.
about that in
So
here.
now there are situations where, like, if it is a collaborative group, yes. Now let's just say this Indigenous artist is in the US and has a slew of dates and then needs a band for whatever else, and that band is coming in at a later date, then that band can go in under a P2
Okay.
as well. So it really, I would just say call our office and then
Mhm.
we'll guide you through it. Definitely for an O, if there are, let's say there is, there would be, I'll use Buffy St. Marie for example. And let's say that, Buffy would, qualify for probably a 3-year O or whatever, or her band would. So if Buffy's band needed, they wanted a 3-year visa, they would have to go under an O2, but you can't have an O2 without an O1. So Buffy would need an O1.
Mm.
Okay. So
All right.
it's not exact. Yeah, it's a little wonky, but for the most part, if they're going in solo, they're okay. If there is any, if they are going to be entering and regularly performing with a Canadian, then or with Canadian or non-Indigenous, let's say
Mhm.
non-Indigenous,
Thank
then
you.
we should just have a quick email or talk, and then I'll sort it out for you.
Yeah, and again, I'll mention that you're very accessible to chat with, and you do a lot of mentorship with artist representatives and artists who are in this position, as well as the fantastic staff that you have there at the head office. Yeah, I would really we always say there's a contract for that. There's a way where there's a will, there's a way. Not every single person crossing the border has their own unique thing going on, just like everybody making a record has their own unique thing going on. And if you're unsure whether or not you qualify for this or that, just call the office. There's they'll figure out the visa that works for you. Okay, so now we're at we got to fees earlier, so
Yeah.
now we're at processing time.
Yes. So what I did kind of touch on that earlier when I was discussing fees. So again, we highly recommend 90 days. Currently, again, like we just said, call us if it's like, oh, I only have 78 days. What are my chances? Just call us and we'll let you know what it's looking like right now. 90 days is more of the guarantee. Like then I could feel like I could guarantee you a visa, except for guarantee you approval on time. When you start submitting at 60 and 65 days, a lot of our permits are being processed within 60 to 65 days. But my heart breaks when there are those ones that actually go 90 days or sometimes 92 days. These things do happen. We don't know when they're going to happen. It's unfortunate when they do. Sometimes, and this does not happen often. I don't want to scare people that much, but there's been the odd time, like there's once a year where a file falls into a black hole somewhere at U.S. immigration. And we have to, we will move heaven and earth. I will get the USCIS Ombudsman's office involved in those situations. We will unearth your file. But in the meantime, you might be missing a few gigs. And it's, and I don't mean to sound nonchalant about it, but it's hard on us as the staff. We feel really bad. We do feel some sort of sense of responsibility, even though it is not as a result of our doing. whenever possible, please allow for 90 days. And if you do not have those, like if it's getting too low, like if you've got 40 days, we're going to recommend either rebooking those first dates, if possible, to a later time in the year. So you can open that up for a 90-day processing window, or you would be required to file premium processing. Now, premium processing does take, at the USCIS end, they take 15 calendar days to process premium processing. We recommend about 30 days. And because, a lot of people don't realize too, it's like, oh, well, we only need 15 days. Well, 15 days starts from the date that USCIS receives it. Our office, depending on our workloads, can take up to 3 days to get to your file. So, if we're having light process, if we've got not a lot of files coming in, then we're turning them over within the day received or within 24 hours of receipt. But there are times where we're inundated with files and we do actually need 3 days at our end, and we never take more than 72 hours. We always push those out within 72 hours. So that's why we recommend 30 days for, we just say it as a general rule of thumb, because that way it's like, oh, I need 30 days. Then they put it in the express post and it gets to us by 27 days because they sent it on a Friday, so just so you understand why we say 30 days, it's to pad it as much as possible to make sure that you get your permit, and don't confuse the 15 days with from the date it leaves your house.
Excellent.
Right.
So
Yep.
I'm going to go into some of these things, but before we head into like merch and gear and taxes and that sort of thing, we talk a little bit about crossing the border. And there was a question earlier saying that, folks, some random, or maybe they were not random, depending on why rejections seem to occur. And I'm guessing this is maybe a rejection for the permit, maybe not at the border, actually, now that I'm reading this question more carefully. Why would a visa application or a permit application be rejected?
By my office or by USCIS? Do we know what the...
I'm not sure.
Well, I'll say both. Okay.
Yeah.
So it might, by my office, if we don't feel that the work evidence submitted is sufficient to pass the test at USCIS. If it doesn't leave our office, it's because we know that USCIS is going to turn it down. So we're just saving you the expense, because if we file that and with USCIS, you're not getting your money back. They'll just say, nope, sorry, rejected, and you do not get a refund because they decide not to issue your permit. So it is, while it may not be nice, we are actually being nice by returning your file if the work evidence if it doesn't meet the eligibility criteria. So there's that. Why USCIS would reject a file? There's a slew of different things. Sometimes there's a person who, we don't really get rejections so much because we are so careful. We reject it ourselves. But there are times where USCIS will issue what's called a request for additional evidence, or an RFE. And it's because they feel that they want additional explanation. They want, maybe there's something that escaped us when we were vetting your work evidence, and they found that there is a gig there that doesn't actually exist, or they can't find proof that it exists. There are sometimes they, because this is a reciprocal kind of it's a reciprocal type program. We have to provide evidence of U.S. artists that have come in to Canada for similar type of performance, but usually we're able to satisfy all those questions. I cannot think offhand when USCIS has rejected anything. There have been with my New York office, yes, and they work very closely with the investigative fraud department of USCIS, because there are times where it seems that, you know, signatures have been forged and that kind of thing. So I've seen that happen. Like my New York office has seen that happen, but not well, like in instances of fraud. But I don't really see rejected by USCIS file. I see them get held up, yes, and then we fix it.
What about so what about crossing the border then? So let's say you have everything, all of your paperwork in order, and you get to the border. Can they reject you entry into the U.S.?
Sure, they can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, there's no, it's that's the final test there. I don't really see that they do. Musicians do sometimes get delayed because they have a border officer that really just wants to put them through the ringer. But I would say if you're flying, you want 3 hours. Do not leave it so tight, if possible, when driving, just in case they decide to detain you and pull you to the side and you know, do a thorough review. You know, I've seen it, I've heard of it more so when musicians try to go into the United States without the proper permit, that they get turned away and rejected. It's usually just a holdup if you do have an approval notice, or, you know, unless, like, we do ask for people to confirm that they have disclosed any criminal history to us, etc. In a situation where maybe perhaps an artist did not do that, they are definitely not getting in with an approval or not. So again, if there's any form of criminal history, please disclose it to us, because it could mean trouble for you later if not.
And if you, let's say you try to enter, cross the border without having a visa to play some gigs, and you're caught doing that, is it what is, you know, the possible ramifications of doing that?
Mostly, I've heard of you just getting heard of the individual getting turned back and then logged in the system as they are not allowed entry again without a visa. So that kind of puts your do not make any vacation plans. Would do fine. You sure you can book additional gigs, get your visa, enter with the visa, and then you will be pretty much cleared. However, everything does stay on your record. I'm actually sitting in Vancouver right now, not even in Toronto where I'm based, and I just did this similar panel yesterday. And one of the artists there said, "How do I get this?" Because he and his band did try to enter the U.S. without a permit, because they were going to go to a wedding and they were playing at the wedding, but I think it was even more of a friend's wedding. And so it wasn't even, you know, anything that was paid, but they were going to, you know, go in for this wedding. And they had all their gear with them. So when you have your gear with you, those are your tools of professional trade. It is going to raise flags with the border officials. So anyway, long story short, this poor individual, he's like, "How do I get this off my record?" I said, "You've got to speak to a lawyer," because it seems, he said it's almost every time, more like every other time he enters the U.S., even with a permit now, he's scrutinized, that it gets brought up. It's on his record. And this was like 7 years ago. It is in the system. He's been a bad seed.
And can people get banned? Can people get banned from or barred from entering?
Yes, they can. Yes, there are situations where their musicians have been banned. You'll need a lawyer to get you out of that. You can be banned for up to life, you know, or a year, or if they feel that you are really, I mean, they have the power to impound your vehicle and your gear as well. So just don't do it, you know, don't do it, and don't argue with them if they say, "No, you need a work permit." Just go away quietly and thank your lucky stars. Because it can get worse. Now, what we didn't touch on though is showcases or gigs where you're not getting paid and where you do not need a visa. So I can't remember where that is in this wonderful filled presentation.
Here we go. Unpaid
work. Unpaid work. There we go. So, okay. So you would enter as a B1 under business class visa, B1 visitor. So just So for definitely like South by Southwest, you do not need a visa to showcase at South by Southwest. The only time you would is if you plan to tour Austin, immediately after. If you've got any other paid gigs that are outside of South by Southwest, you must then get a permit. Yes, so there's that. Folk Alliance International, which we just finished. Because it's a conference where you're showcasing to potential buyers and agents and labels, etc. You do not, and it's contained. They're not selling tickets. It's not a show. For instance, a pay to play is not a showcase, and it's actually not that we will not process visas on pay to play, just so you know. Because that is not, that goes against every fiber of our being as an opinion that you have to pay them to put on a show for them. No.
Yeah. And for the B1, you can apply for this. There's a B1 letter of support that you can get from the CFM. But also, contact if you don't have one already, contact the conference, contact Folk Alliance. They always have a letter that they do up every year that they'll send to you. That's like an official invite, that says this person isn't getting paid. They're performing as part of this closed industry event. And having that with you is very helpful. I'm going to move things along a little bit because I want to make sure that we do get to the proposed fee increases. And
okay, I will just say quickly, let me talk about recording quickly. If you're going in to record your own album, or you're signed to a Canadian label and you're going in to record your album for that Canadian label, you do not need a visa. You can go in under B1 status. If you are recording for a US label, you absolutely need a visa. So where there's a US entity tied to your engagement in that sense, you need one. But again, if it's you're recording your own independent album or with a Canadian label, you're just using a US facility, you basically it's spending money or earning money. If you're spending money in the US, typically you don't require a visa. So I'll just leave it there.
Great. Yeah. And Nathan asked a question about whether, if you added recording dates or playing a festival, you get asked to do some recording afterwards. Can you just notify? And I'm guessing the answer to that question would be like whether or not it falls within the visa time. So if you've applied for a visa for just that festival, and that's what has been approved, and then you want to add dates, you have to make another application. So that's
unless it falls under, because I believe the question included recording. So this is the thing. So you're legally allowed to stay in the United States 10 days before or 10 days after your visa, but we won't apply for those dates. That's up to you to deal with the border officer, because we have to make sure that we're not, we need to explain the time frame that we're applying for you. So, if you were going to go and you think this, it's going to be a couple of days in the studio and it's going to fall within this 10-day time frame, and meets the requirements I just said, where it's an independent recording. You're not recording, like you're recording for a Canadian entity, you're recording for yourself, that's fine. Just know that even though you may not be working or recording, if you're staying in any longer than 10 days, you are probably, there will probably be some sort of questioning about that. So just be prepared. Do not stay 3 months beyond your visa period. And even if you are going in for something that wouldn't require a visa, I would recommend you come home and then go back in for 3 months, because you are, again, allowed to visit as a Canadian for up to 6 months in any given year.
Thank you. And Derek had the question about, is there a crunch time? Is there like a time where there's where there's more applications than other times, if you're trying to be strategic about when you put in your application?
Summer, festivals leading up now, like it's going to start ramping up. April, May, what have you, is going to really start ramping up because of summer festivals and stuff. Then, we get a big, huge crunch in December, but I mean, it's pretty steady. I don't know. We're probably processing about roughly 50 petitions per week for any number of musicians. So it's hard to say. So, but I'd say that we average that. Sometimes it's worse, but leading up to summer festivals would be a crunch time. Yeah.
Hey, thank you. So let's talk about the now, the
Okay.
changes,
The changes.
the big
Okay.
news.
So yeah. Oh, okay. Go ahead. If you want to start with questions, that's fine, or I can just ramble.
No, I'd like you to let's start with a ramble.
Okay.
Maybe just give
Ramble.
people, for anybody who doesn't know about the situation, maybe just give us a little bit of an overview of what is going on and why we're concerned.
Okay. So USCIS in the beginning of January stated that stated proposals for various visa increases. This is not just artists, but it's, I will be speaking to what is impacting artists. So there are a slew of proposed increases. The reasons that they have given is that they have not increased the fee since 2016, and that everything costs more now, inflation, and then another part to this is that they thought for some reason that they would put on the backs of artists a levy to help them fund their humanitarian and asylum efforts. So the asylum seeking, refugee seeking persons that they're clearing and processing visas for, that the U.S. government should really be offering for free or for paying, like they pay. Like, I don't know why they've saddled this on various classifications. For instance, to even farmers who hire seasonal workers to pick apples and carrots and harvest berries, that the farmers are being faced with this for those types of workers. So it's just really there's no rhyme or reason as to what the visa classifications that are potentially going to get saddled with this $600 levy. So at any rate, I just want to throw out to you what USCIS gave as their reasoning. I'm not agreeing with that reasoning, of course, but this is what they're saying. So the fee is currently $460. They have proposed upwards of a 251% increase. The P classifications of visa would go from $460 to $1,615. The O visas would go to $1,655. And the premium fee would be atop that. So, even some of us are saying, well, if you're going to do all visas in 15 days, sure, you can have the 16-15. It's cheaper than what we're paying now. But that is not the case, because I've been asked that question recently. Oh, does this mean that we're going to get expedited visas? The answer, unfortunately, is no. So that is what they're at. We have done extensive lobbying. We have been in contact with the chair of the committee on the standing committee on the Department of Homeland Security. We've gone right to the top. We have worked with, I have been in this visa lobby, a part of this visa lobby group called the Performing Artist Visa Task Force. Actually, it was implemented in 2001. So I've been working with these entities for that long, on any matter of USCIS issues. And there are U.S. attorneys in this lobby group and various other, U.S. entities. And we are all lobbying Congress and, the individual Congress reps, and U.S. House reps. There is also what USCIS is mandated to do is leave their proposals open for public comment for up to 60 days. So we have issued our public comments in opposition to this fee increase through the U.S. Federal Register portal. So yes, so we're doing everything possible. I actually just had a meeting with we have the AFM has a number of local offices throughout the US and Canada. For those who are not familiar, I just met with the entire contingent of California locals, which is quite a number of them, and they are all writing in, as well as our Seattle local. So we are, we've mobilized our US locals as well. So, we're trying to essentially bombard USCIS with so much objection, they will, feel, that there's no way that they should do this. And the other thing too is the more that we bombard them, the deadline for submission of public comment is March 13th now. It was just extended by a week. But then as soon as starting March 14th, they have to go through and read every single comment. They're obligated to do that. So the more that we put in comments, the longer it's going to take for them to get through, and then the longer for them to therefore implement an increase. So it's kind of a double strategy there. Yes. Okay. So I think, Rosalind, you came off mute, so it seems like
I did. I mean, maybe not a question as much as like a, and trying to beef up our case here, just to say that, like, I can't remember if you touched on the premium processing or not when it comes to these changes, but so we're in the scenario where we've been talking about the fees, the P2 is being proposed to increase, and this is just the fee to USCIS. This isn't the fee. This isn't counting all the other stuff. To $1,615 US. If you need to get premium processing, which many people do, that is on top of that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So you're looking at, I think, $3,220. I believe is what that would be for just a band. Double that if you have crew.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, and there's certainly folks who I'm sure when we were going through the fees part are balking at the fees that they're already at. We already get all the we've all heard all the complaints about it. So this is like so much more money than that. And I honestly don't know why everyone isn't losing their minds over this, because it's such in my mind it's such a big deal.
Well, I must say the entities that I've been working with, and they're a considerable amount, a number of them are losing their minds over it. So, quite a few.
I want more minds.
Yeah, exactly. It just doesn't always get to, like, I try to keep certain people, I keep you up to date as best as possible. I try to keep people up to date as best as possible, but it's hard to get it all out while doing the work too. So, I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I know that you've been doing a huge amount of work on this and rallying folks in the US. And so, but, as you mentioned, you can, as a Canadian org, write into those comments, identifying yourself as an international entity. So yeah, I mean, I really want
as a foreign entity. Okay, so now we have, because again, I've been working with the U.S. lobby group, and then it really is, I mean, it's going to be the U.S. voices. We were trying to push the U.S. end of things as much as possible, because at the end of the day, it's going to be, their citizens that are going to really move the needle here. But now it actually is just one of the attorneys on this lobby group said, no, we can actually, maybe we should start pushing all of our, foreign contacts, and when they, for international contacts rather, to start making comment as well, now that we've got a good U.S. base of comments against. So yes, I'm going to be putting something out to people. It's probably going to be tomorrow now, because I have a flight to catch in a little bit. So I'll do my best. If I get delayed at the airport, I'll do it at the airport. At any rate, yes. So I will be reaching out to my list of Canadian entities, and yes, go ahead and submit comment. It's best from an entity that represents, they can say, we represent X amount of artists. While yes, I mean, technically individual artists could physically post a comment. We're trying not to encourage that, just because we want everything to be refined. We want the entities to stand on their own. Not that musicians can't submit a very refined comment, but it's just better to come from entities. And then you do note yourself, because there is like a little drop box, what type of entity are you? I'm an organization. Are you foreign or domestic? And you have to indicate that you're foreign.
So really the best, the best call to action is still, to contact your friends and colleagues and, people that you work with in the US, and urge them to write in this comment, talk to their to the US representatives, their government representatives. And we have a whole bunch of I put a link to our site. We have a whole bunch of links in there to a lot of the resources that CFM and Local 1000 have, and TMA as well, 149 have posted to help folks in doing this. So, like, examples of letters and what you can write, and there's a lot of resources out there if you want to get involved. And you can also contact us too. We have graphics made up. If any organizations or folks want to post it on social media, feel free to access the graphics that we've made about it. I'm not sure if we have any questions in here about that, which is, because we just explained it so great.
So well, yeah. They've all you know what it is? They've all dropped off the call now. They're like, forget it. I'm not going to the US.
Oh no, what have we done? No.
Yeah.
They're just too busy writing to their American friends right now and urging them to speak up against this. But I will I will.
We have something in here about dual citizens. No, a dual citizen, as long as you've got your U.S. passport, does not require a visa. But yes, the rest of their band would, yes, as Canadians. That dual citizenship isn't enough to coast in a whole bunch of people. That's called illegal immigration.
Great, and I'll just double check to see if there's any more questions. Derek wants to know if we can talk about UKU. We are going to get that into those places in the rest of the series. So we have four more sessions coming up with various other export experts. Oh, I'm glad I didn't call it that.
oh yeah.
If I would have thought of that alliteration. Oof.
Yeah.
Export. So yeah, I think the next two will be the next two for sure will be about EU. I think Nordic. Eastern Europe, and then Nordic region will be the next 2 weeks. So stay tuned for that. If we got to all the questions, then I'm going to. Sorry, I see one more here that we didn't get to. Just that if there's, do you know if grants will cover your visa fee? I know there's all sorts of different grants, but
well, I specifically, I know that factor when you've been approved for a touring grant, 80% of those fees will be covered, up to 80%. Sorry, they will cover up to 80% of your touring expenses when approved for a touring grant. And yes, that the expenses that you submit can include the visa fees. Yes. Now, unless there's something that's changed, but I confirmed that a few years ago, and yes, so that is what I understood.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And you can get a hold of Liana through, go to the CFM website, cfmusicians.org. I got it. Still got it. cfmusicians.org. And there's contacts for your local, and there's contact for Liana on there. We can leave you with one nugget of wisdom. Is just call them, contact them, you know, there's an answer to everything, and Liana probably has it. I'd like to thank our folks at our staff making the dream team work here at Folk Music Ontario, and also to Folk Music Canada and the Government of Canada for supporting these sessions. And thank you so much, Liana, and thanks to everybody for showing up. And we'll see you next week.
Yep, my pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.